So welcome everyone, and thanks so much for coming to what I hope is going to be a really wonderful and interesting conversation. We have here on my left Mark Bradford, whose project for the U.S. Pavilion encompasses both the exhibition Tomorrow is Another Day, as well as a 6-year collaboration with Rio Terra de Pensieri, a Venice-based social cooperative that offers employment opportunities to incarcerated people, and Sharon Lockhart, over here on my right, whose project for the Polish Pavilion was developed in collaboration with a group of adolescent girls living at Rudchenko, do I have that correct? A home for girls outside of Warsaw. So I'm Gamian Guillot, the Director of Interpretation and Public Engagement at the Baltimore Museum of Art, co-commissioner of the U.S. Pavilion this year, along with the Rose Art Museum at Brandeis University. So today we're going to hear a bit from both of the artists and then get into what I hope will be a really wonderful and rich discussion. We'll have time for a Q&A at the end, so please start thinking of your questions. But before we begin, I want to thank Chiara Barbieri and the folks over at the Peggy Guggenheim Collection, as well as the U.S. Department of State, and of course the Venice Biennale. And a really big and heartfelt thank you goes out to Jill Weinrich, who has been doing everything for us on this project. So thank you to Jill for helping to organize this event, the opening events for the U.S. Pavilion, and all of the work yet to come before we run to the end of this show. So thank you so much, Jill. So I think we'll just go ahead and get started. I think Mark is going to talk to us first about what he's got going on, so take it away, Mark.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's actually, the weather's pretty good. When the pavilion opened, it was like rain, 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 right? So, oh, there's that art and practice book. I don't even know what brev storia means, but okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, I guess this, actually, me and you were kind of talking a little bit about kind of the idea of like, how does Rio Terra, the prison project, and the American Pavilion go together? And I always say they go together because I go together. They go together because I decided they go together. But I really often think that there was a lot of formation that happens in me or in an artist before they become an artist, before they go to art school. There's this whole history. And I think a whole lot of our personal pains and personal triumphs and personal or earliest insecurities probably come from that site in a weird way, even before you get to art school and figure all that stuff out. So with that said, I'll just talk a little bit about kind of the social work that I do and the pavilion itself and how they tie together. You can do that. Oh, you can just keep going. Okay, we're gonna go. Oh, I'll just talk a little bit about kind of the idea of materiality. And for me, when I became an artist, one of the things that I was very interested in is interrogating where the materials come from. The ideas, of course, artists are very varied. But I really wanted to. The first thing you pick up is material, and I was like, wait a minute, I want this material to speak as well. And so for me, because I was interested in social histories, pulling material from the urban environment or from outside of the studio, I felt had a history built in it, the sort of a palimpsest that you couldn't erase. And that's me and Jose doing what we do. And it's usually a performance. We put on these kind of city worker jackets and act really pissed off and underpaid. And people leave us alone as long as it's in the like south side of the city. As soon as it goes west and more affluent, you get busted. So you can just kind of go. Okay, I'm a painter. We can get back to that later. So let's talk a little bit about art and practice, art plus practice. 3 or 4 years ago, I started to think about how I could work with a foundation of contemporary ideas and also addressing need. And what I found, the two things that I rotate around is need and access. Sort of, you can go. So the foundation sits in South Central, which is kind of this romantic narrative of South Central and gangster rap and violence. That's not actually the truth. It's kind of middle and working class people. and but this kind of media hype and music keeps this narrative alive. You just keep going. So keep going, keep going. These are founders. Keep going. I'll talk. Okay, so let's stop here for a minute. I'm going to talk about contemporary art and who has access to contemporary art. So, although the foundation sits in a working class neighborhood, I built a space of contemporary art so that the local community could have access to contemporary ideas. They can debate them. They can not agree. They can say this is not a reflection of the community. I love when black people walk in and say, this isn't black art. And I say, well, he's a black artist, and this is black art. So this idea of pushing away these kind of stereotypes, in a way. And for me, I got exposed to contemporary art later. But what if contemporary art was right on the way to the wig shop, and on the way to church, and on the way? So I just wanted to give people access earlier. That's it. So just move it along. So also at the same time, although I'm interested in contemporary art, in this area, foster care or foster youth is disproportionately large. At the local high school, it's 50 to 60% who are in care of the system. At the middle school, it's 40 to 45%, which means that most of the young people that you see in the neighborhood possibly could be in care. And there's a park very near, and I would see so many young people hanging out, and I began to talk to them, and they would say, oh, I'm in care. I just got kicked out of care. And so I thought, well, I think we should address this too. And so that's where it came, art and practice. And it was really about listening. And so we partnered with First Place for Youth, which basically does job training, therapy, housing, and again, if someone is in need, then I use all of my resources and access to give them and to partner with other organizations that will help them. So you can see these are some of the kids that we work with. It's usually about 150 a year. It rotates. It's like a 2-year program. They're filling out job applications. So there's a lot of job training that goes in. You assume that everyone knows how to fill out a job application, but a lot of times people don't even know where to begin. So this idea of helping people in need, and the currency that I'm going to get has to be, everybody can agree that the currency is going to be the same. I think if you have all this access, and I think the currency is going to be, we talk like a soul currency. People in need they need tangible things. They need a place to live. They need jobs. They need training. But at the same time, you have to listen. So it's doing a lot of listening. Go forward. This is interesting. I love this slide because this is my mother's hair salon, and we were there for about 10 years, maybe something like 10, a little bit longer. And now this is part of the foundation, and this is the job training lab where they go and they look for jobs on the internet, and there's a job specialist to help them. But I like the fact that this is kind of started in my mom's hair salon. This is a large classroom, by the way. This was actually my studio before it turned into the foundation. So we have lecturers that come in and they speak to job training, job placement. We have a therapist that comes and deals with their personal issues. Let's keep going. These are, I have no idea, people that came to art and practice. Okay, keep going. This is interesting. We developed an app with another artist. He's sitting out there, Sean Boyle. And often people that are in care lose touch with their siblings. And so what we developed is we developed an app and a software that if they download all the places that they've lived, that this app will track. If you notice on the right, you can look, it's called Siblings. It tracks and connects with other people that have had those pathways and the possibility that that could be a sibling. And this is people loading in their information into the beta. And it's specifically for siblings in foster care trying to find each other. They lose touch, and this is something that we developed along with Sean. Let me just keep going. You keep going. And often we will hire, to do our catalogs, to do our silk screening. It's really, it comes down to really the basics. They need jobs, they need roots, they need places. And so we really focus on that on the practice side. The Biennale. Okay. So just think of a ruin. I really wanted to make a ruin. I wanted to make something that felt like it was sort of waste. Something that was like a site, something had happened, like the housing collapse, half-built homes, and then something happened in the middle of the night, it just disappeared. So this became like a ruin, a site. I worked outside in front for 2 or 3 months, working inside the pavilion, and then I just left it. This is the middle passage of it, and it kind of feels like a grotto. And on the left side, it talks about Greek mythology, and on the right side, and the pavilion itself really is about painting. You can keep going. That's a Medusa sculpture that sits in the middle of the left pavilion, left room, not the pavilion, left side of it. Keep going. This is the middle passage. I call it the middle passage. You can play with the idea of middle passage and slavery, or you can talk about the binary between kind of European Greco-Roman art history moving into kind of an American narrative of painting. This is what you are presented with when you walk in. It has to do with collapse, the collapse of a center, and that the person or people are pushed to the edges, that the center is rotten, that it's no longer available. Made from the same material, but I wanted to play with the physicality of the body, This is really me grappling with American painting. This is like me grappling with the history of American painting and what it means to be an African-American painter in 2017. And the back painting is called Go Tell It on the Mountain, which James Baldwin was a very he impressed me a lot with his force, and that was someone that I looked at very early. But the idea of mountaintops and who owns mountaintops and who doesn't own mountaintops, and the whole idea of a mountaintop, and people making reference to painting being the mountaintop. So to pollute that, to make it less, to stain it, there's a saying like a fly in the buttermilk, to stain it, to pollute it, to make it less pure. And keep going. These were early end paper paintings, and they had to do with kind of making paintings feel like water. That there was just like silence on the surface, and this Medusian, which is the name of the sculpture, with an externalized rage. So what does one do with rage? Do we internalize it or externalize it? And that's the kind of the questions that I asked. If something is still on the outside, there's a possibility that beneath that surface there could be infinite possibilities. Let's leave it at that. And so Rio Terra is the other part, and that came from me wandering around Venice and discovering that there was a women's prison and really being fascinated by that, because that's something that I think people like to cover up. And society loves to cover up mistakes. We don't embrace mistakes as we embrace success. We embrace redemption oh, I've gone through the 12-step program and I'm redeemed. And then we can talk about it. But just mistakes are not on the same level. And so I really thought, oh, this would be an interesting project to work with because they were passionate. It was already in place. Let me go through the slides. So they make bags, they make products. And when I started talking to them, I asked them what they needed. And they were very clear. We wanted a physical presence in Venice so that people would understand who we were. And so that's where the product came from, to give them a physical presence in Venice, that they could sell their products, they could stand on their own, and they could tell their own stories. And it's been amazing. Some of the people in the program now work with me. There's actually one here today. So it went from working inside of the prison to outside the prison to working in, and this is what I believe in, the possibility that where something begins does not necessarily mean where it has to end up. And this is a 6-year collaboration, and this is what they'll tell me first year. The second year, we'll have, right, it'll morph. And I wanted to talk with Sharon today because I feel like she's like my sister in all of this, you know? When you have these kind of crazy ideas outside of the, like, kind of the norm, and you hear someone else doing it, you feel like a kinship, like, yeah, you know, I get that. On an emotional level, I get that. And so when I heard, you know, you can also do the pavilion, it just felt like really right. And it's funny though, in our personal life, we don't see each other that much, which is kind of interesting. But every time we see each other, we're always like in the corner talking super intensely. So.
I know. I remember asking. Oh, sorry, Mark. No, I was just going to say, like a few years ago, I think I was working at a university at USC, and I was a tenured professor for 15 years, and I sat next to you at a dinner, and you were telling me about art and practice, and I was like, oh my God, will you hire me? I was like, that's everything I believe in, you know. So, and I was just making my work and stuff, but that was a really important time for me because I just saw something that was happening in education that I didn't believe in, and where the university was situated and how it didn't participate with that geography. So yeah, meeting you is kind of like one of the reasons I quit, I think. Yeah. So thank you. Yeah.
You can talk, Sharon. I'm done.
I think this is a good moment. Nice moment to, apparently not. This is a nice moment to transition over to the project that you've been working on, Sharon, and you can talk a little bit about sort of how that dovetails with some of the things that you've been thinking about with Mark's work.
I'm not sure which slide we have. Do I have a slide?
We do have a slide. I saw them. Yeah,
Okay, maybe you can go to the next slide.
Okay. And you are free to click through if you wish.
Okay. Okay. So in 2009, I was invited to Łódź, Poland by a curator to participate in an exhibition and to make a piece for an exhibition. And when he called me, I said, well, I don't really work like that. I don't go somewhere, make something, and leave. It's usually a long-term involvement with a person or a community. And I have no idea when it's going to end, and when it's finished, then it has a life, and then it's like I'm on tour with it for a while. So I'm a slow artist, and I don't make very much work. That's the first thing. And so in 2009, when this curator invited me, I had just finished Lunch Break, which was a long project I did in Maine, where I'm from, and I worked with a shipyard, the Bath Iron Works, for a year, and the project was about their lunch breaks and about this idea of free time, which was something that was fought for, that's being lost again today. And so when this curator, Adam Budak, called me, he wouldn't take no for an answer. And he just kept sending me information about the city, and he kept sending me these these fabulous, like the documentary film history, or he knew I would be interested in the city because it you know, it was an industrial city, and it looked a lot like a Dickens novel and just coming out of lunch break. So anyway, so basically he seduced me into going there, and he said, if you don't want to make anything, you don't have to, but at least come see it and spend some time. And so I was like, okay, and I went, and all these other artists were flying in and out, fabulous artists I'd never met. I was so jealous. I was like, they have these ideas, they come in, they go, someone makes the work, and then they come back for the opening. I was like, fuck, I want to do that, right? And so I was feeling like a loser. I was like, I couldn't even make a photograph because the photograph would have taken a year of research to figure out what I wanted to photograph. And I would need to talk to all of these people, and I would have to know the location and its history. And so I was feeling kind of down, and I was walking through the city towards the end, and the city's structure really interested me because it's all based on this main boulevard. And everyone's just coming and going, but you never see them living. And there's all of these courtyards off of the main streets, and I started wandering into the courtyards because I heard children. And the exhibition was supposed to take place in an industrialist palace that then became an orphanage during the communist times. And so I was thinking about children's voices in that space and not being with their family and being taken for 6 days a week to live there in this orphanage. And so then I wandered through the city. Maybe we can show, I think I'm totally going backwards, so maybe we could start at the end. Can we go back to the end? Or no, I'll just talk. So I walked into one of these courtyards, and it was, this resilience and imagination and play and poverty and but it was kind of like looking back at Helen Levitt's film or something, and just seeing what is possible with nothing. And I just started talking with the kids, and then 3 days later, after going around and meeting all these kids in these courtyards, I brought a producer with me and asked them to talk to the parents to explain, I think I want to make a film here with the kids doing what they do. And the kids were correcting the translator, and we had no translation before. So it was in those courtyards that I met this young girl, Milena, and she was 9 then, and then we stayed in touch over the years, and she did something to me. There was something, and when I went back, I immediately went to her and her brother, Seba, and I kept in touch with her. Something told me that, I just felt the need that, she needed some help. And so I kept visiting her, and then around 2012, you just go all the way to the end. This is my pavilion. And then in 2011, I think, she moved into different institutions, like what Mark talks about. This is Milena. This was when I first met her. Go back. So this is one of the courtyards. That's her brother, Seba. And so she moved to this center. She moved to many centers, and then eventually she moved to this center, Rychenko, for young women. And she had told me she wanted to write a book about her life, and I was trying to help her find her voice. And I started researching this man, Janis Korczak, whose name was over all of these orphanages and institutions. And I found out what an incredible radical person he was, like one of the first real advocates of children's rights. And he ran an orphanage where the children had their own parliament. He ran the main newspaper asked him to do a children's newspaper that would come out weekly in the main newspaper. And he took it on and thought it would be easy, but then he talks about how actually writing the news is difficult because you have to tell the truth. And this is in 1926. And so the newspaper ran weekly from 26 to 39. And it's incredible, and I always wanted. In 2013, I tried to translate it, and I tried to have it in an exhibition, and I tried to research the archive, and I couldn't get access. And so I would be at press conferences, and I would say, doesn't someone want to give money to translate this history that no one has read? And nobody stepped up to the plate. And so then years go by, and I started workshops for Milena and her friends about the voice and critical thinking and about what an opinion is and how to listen to someone and how to use your voice as a tool. And when you, as a young woman, when you don't have a say in where you are and when you get up and when you go to bed and everything about your day, it was important, I think, at that point. But then as soon as I started to get to know the girls, this is from the first summer in 2014, and we had all of the classes on a farm. I rented a farm, and I wanted it to be about outside of the institution, and so everything took place in landscape, and it was very unstructured and non-hierarchical. This is just a few days ago. This is our class on Venice in the woods with the girls. We just had our first sex ed classes this year. So the first year I thought it should be like the voice and power, and then I'm like, no, wait, like we need a therapist, we need to move. So I hired a movement therapist and a theater director and contact improv and a comedy improv. This is like over the last 4 years. And now all those girls have, what is it called when you're out of the system, when you turn 18? They're aged out. I see all of those girls have no place to go. They have no jobs. They have no job training. They don't know. So this year we started on the farm to get to know all the new girls, because there's 50 new girls. All the girls I worked with are gone, pretty much. And to get to know them, they write journals to me, and I get it translated, and I write back. But this time I said, let's start with like their information and where they've been shifted from, like where have they been all over Poland? Like I want to learn. And one of my interns had a brilliant idea. She was like, let's make CVs. So now they have CVs, and now on their CVs, they were the editorial team that chose the translations for the pavilion. So I made this film, Rodchenko, with the girls, which was about voice. And then when I was given the pavilion, I really went to the girls and I was like, do you want to do this? And I think it's really important that there's almost 50 women representing Poland this year. That's a big deal. And also that these girls are really honored in the pavilion, and they're given center stage, and they are looking at you, and they have something to say, and it's in English and Polish and broken, and this is the way we communicate. And so when you use a word like trust, it means something. It's not just a word. Or if you say hate, it's a big word. It's a big word, and it's like, yeah. I don't know. I'm exhausted because I just got off the farm in Poland, and now we're all here. And then this is the little review of the film that we made. And for the film, I hired a choreographer, Marta Żułek. I always hire people from Poland because it's about trying to build a kind of network for the girls when they get out, that they know all of these creative people all over Poland. And all you have to do is like pick up the phone, and they all love you, and they will never forget you, and they can help you, you know? And so now we're trying to start internship programs. And I mean, I can't do it though. This is the problem. It's like, you're amazing. I'm just like, I feel like it's so hard to get anything done. But in the pavilion, what I really wanted to do is I wanted it to be about black and white and about newsprint. And the girls spent I think it was like a month in divided groups, reading all 677 issues, debating which one should be translated. They talked about how things in the newspapers are totally similar to things that they're experiencing today. And we when the girls finally, after all of this research, got to go to the National Library and experience the archive, this was really beautiful to hold something that was 80 years old, that was written by these children that they were reading, and realizing that there is a place for their voice. And so the library was a really important place, a site, as a historical site, and I wanted to kind of mirror this contemplative space. So I borrowed the benches that are in the photograph from the National Library, and also we borrowed, which the girls agreed that they thought this was a really good idea, and we borrowed this modernist clock that stopped at 2:30, which I thought was so funny because your art and practice bag is 2:30. Isn't that weird? Yeah, yeah, and it was this idea that, yeah, time is stopped, and there's these, from 1926 to 2017, like one of the main photographs, the one at the end, is Ola. It's called Ola, Our Review, Today in Politics, 1939. And for me, that was really important, that it's like, that's what's facing you, and it's a strong woman facing you. That also that you don't know is a woman right away, which I think is really quite beautiful and is a statement that the sitter is making. I wanted this half of the exhibition to be bathed in light, like just daylight. And like, I was recently at the Ministry of Culture's office in Poland trying to raise money for the internship program, and we walked around this huge office that he had, and he was like, this is, Penderecki, our famous composer. This is our famous, Adam Mickiewicz, writer. And I'm like, who's that? And he's like, oh, that's his wife. Oh, that's his wife. And then I was like, oh, who's this beautiful painting? And he said, that's nobody. And it was a woman. And he didn't mean it like that, but he didn't know the person's name. And to me, I was like, okay, that's what my work is about. It's like, this girl is respected and honored. It's like a historical painting of her. So, yeah. But I think I'd probably talk too much. But in the film, I hired this choreographer. I hired musicians, writers, educators. Everyone's Polish. Everything's in Polish. There's no translation for me. It's usually I'm doing that. Usually I'm just getting bits and pieces. I get things translated at night. And I hired this choreographer because she's so in control of her body and so empowered, and she uses English language in her performances and pop culture. And so I knew she would be the perfect person for the girls. And this was the first time in 4 years that I actually talked about the English language. And the only reason we used English in the pavilion is because it's an international venue, and the girls knew that 1 million people were going to see this. And so, yeah, and we talked about that a lot, that like 1 million people will see you in the pavilion. Like, are you ready? And they're like, yeah. And they talked about what hard work it was. It's not easy making a film. It's not easy editing 677 issues. Like, they did a job. This is a job to be on a resume, So, yeah, so I feel really connected to you in that way. I feel like I don't have enough power to do what I wish I could do, but I'm doing it on a small scale. Yeah.
Well, let's start talking. Let's get into a discussion here. I think something that interests me so much about both of your work is sort of the relationship between what ends up on the walls of the pavilion and the deep engagement with the social dimension. Mm-hmm. And it's very interesting to me that neither one of you identify as social practice artists. You both have some issues around the term, and I completely feel that and agree. It's a very different way of merging or melding, or in some cases just having parallel tracks of the aesthetic and the social. And so I'd love to just hear more about sort of how you see the work that you do outside of the studio informing the work within the studio, and how those two sides of your practice kind of intertwine with each other.
Well, I can say that I'm realizing more and more the older I get that the way I make art is insane, and it's from the back way. It's like I'm doing it all wrong. But I have somehow, I guess I have to accept the fact that it's the right way, because if I did it the right way, which, getting permission or whatever, it would be the wrong way, right? So, but then I started looking, and like 5 years ago, I'm like, I can't keep working like this. I got to change. I can't. Everything's crazy. And then the way I run my studio, the way I teach classes, everything is the way I work. And yeah, interns in the studio become studio managers, or like I'm right now with the girls in Rachenko, we're trying to, like this summer, we tried to hire 2 of the girls to work on the farm that had left. And, so things like that. But, yeah.
How does it inform? I think that having a long history as a merchant has a lot to do with sort of, I can kind of see it because I seem to be obsessed with sustainability. Like that's always the thing that I think about when I'm dealing with people in need. Sustainability. How are you going to sustain yourself? How are you going to get a place to live? How are you going to get your high school diploma? How are you going to get the CV? How are you going to get this idea of sustainability? The one thing that the middle class promises you is that you will be protected. You will be protected. You go to school and we will protect you. Often people don't have that type of protection. So that's the thing that kind of seems to be I circulate around a lot. So I think that I would say that the more I engage in kind of these projects that come and breathe out of the fabric of society, I think it helps people see into my studio work more. I just did it backwards. I went to art school, I started making work, and I had a practice, a studio practice, and then I had exhibitions and art talks, and that was about it. And then catalogs and people. But I found that when I started doing work that just kind of was really coming out of that site, that it made the context, I think people were able to enter in a little bit more. So it gave it a little bit of background, I think, a little bit of background, and it hit maybe some of the political and cultural ideas more directly. But I don't know why don't I like, I mean, social practice, I get it. What I have a problem with is that it felt like this new thing had to be developed to deal with people. Well, I think artists have been engaging with communities long time before social practice. It's just that it maybe didn't have a name, community or community activist or community or even a lot of interesting stuff came out of not community centers. A lot of stuff came out of those, a lot of interesting arts and activism came out of those spaces. So I think it's unfair to say we've only started. And then also, this is another thing I have a problem with. It's almost like you're making everybody outside of the art world like another species. Like, wow, you're dealing with those people. As if you're not part of those people. So for me, I just thought, well, before we became artists, we probably came from those communities, right? I mean, before we did this, we belonged to a certain community. And so I just saw, I do actually feel like I'm getting tired of like slash this, artist slash art activist slash philanthropist slash. I just think that the definition of what an artist means has to be expanded. Right? Just like expand the definition of what we can do. Like, how about instead of naming us, it's like African Americans. Now we're African American. A few years ago, we were black. Before that, we were colored. How about just have a different conversation about what it means to be black in this country instead of, you know what, let's just change the word. And that's just going to make everything better. So that's probably why for me. I don't know, how about for you?
I'm just thinking of terms and
Label.
labels. And a big thing are the labels that are put upon people and how hard it is to break that. And I think a lot of the people I work with in the past, not just the girls from Machenko, but, you know, yeah, it can happen at such a young age too. And if that label is just continued, yeah, you're really a little bit in trouble. And yeah, this term difficult, that these girls are labeled difficult. And then as a woman artist, I'm labeled difficult. Oh, she's difficult to work with. That pisses me off. It really pisses me off. And, you know, for someone to, the girls at one point were like, why are you working with us? Why did you choose us? We're so difficult. We're bad. And I'm like, you're not, it's just like, let's forget that. Like, just let's get rid of that term right now. But, yeah, I see labeling as a huge issue, especially. No.
But but again, I think I'm fascinated by the labels because we internalize these labels and then we begin to act them out. And then how do you break it? And then oftentimes the people that I work with in the foster youth program, they have this kind of what I call like the aura of sin around them, like, oh, I am such a bad person. And I was like, no, that has to do with kind of what was given to you. That label was given to you. It's the same thing of I have probably been called enough names in my life that aren't Mark Bradford to last me the rest of my life. Let's just leave it at that. But many of the labels, like I've been called nigger. But what I realized is that I didn't need that. They needed that. So when I realized that I didn't need that, but they needed that, then being called a faggot, being called a sissy, they need that. So those labels exist because other people need them. And so when I'm working with this kind of constituency, I try to make them understand is that other people need you to feel that. And that's not I had a very close friend of mine, an older woman. She's very wise. And she said, what people think of, Mark, what people think of me is none of my business. And I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. That's kind of interesting. So, but but like power, how do we take these young people that have had, some made mistakes, some were just born into a situation, but they want to integrate or better themselves or move out of what was given to them into something that they decide on their own terms. I love that. How do we take someone from the back of the room and demand that they're in the front? That has to do with power. Has to do with a woman not asking, can she sit at the table, but if there's a chair, sitting down. And I love that. And this, it reminds me the possibility. When I'm talking with the young people, especially in the program, I say, don't get upset with the judgment. That's them, and it's going to happen. Just move past it. Keep your eye on what you're there for. So when I'm talking to them about how to present themselves in a job interview, or when I convince someone with lots of power and access to come down and talk to them, I am super excited because it's going to mean so much to them when I get them that job, or when I get the internship, or when I get someone to be able to work in the pavilion. I get excited, but I really think that it's a way of, it's a soul currency for me. It's kind of remembering that I'm not in the back of the building, I'm not in the back seat anymore. I push forward, and I love to have, power is both invisible and very visible. And as soon as you try to move power around, it becomes very visible.
Oh, yeah.
And you learn your place. but I love to, they sit you in this chair and I'd love to get up and sit in another chair.
Part of that is what's so interesting, I think, about where both of your work is positioned right now. Because what you're seeing is these very powerful institutions that to some extent are failing, right? Institutional failure is a huge part of like what has made the space for both of these projects, right? That if the state or if the powerful or if the institution were doing what it was supposed to be doing or what the social contract originally said it was going to be doing, I think your practices might look very different. But because that space exists, that the power is no longer the authority.
Oh, it's the authority.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
yeah, I get it. But,
You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
but also,
Yeah.
but
It's failing,
we
yeah.
can, I just never thought that I couldn't do what I wanted to do and operate in spaces wherever I wanted to operate. I mean, I grew up, my mom never made a big deal of like working in an all black environment and living in an all white environment. So I just thought you move and navigate wherever you want to go. Like I didn't see the problem. Well, when I became older, people would tell me what the problem was. So I think that for me, doing the American Pavilion and working with Rio Terra was just me navigating sites that I had an interest in. I think and one thing interesting in America, I find, oh my God, America is obsessed with race, but we never like to talk about class. And I think a lot of, when they would call me, well, the hairdresser from South Central, it was a code word for class. It was like a code word for class, and kind of many of the black people that I would meet were quote unquote black bourgeoisie. Now I serviced the black bourgeoisie. I understood the black bourgeoisie, and we serviced the working class, the state, we serviced anybody. But I understood, but the problem is we don't talk about class in the U.S. until, well, it seems like now we're talking about class. The North and the South again it seems like it's a, what's interesting is one of the first times I can remember in the U.S., we're really having conversations about nationhood, not just race. Yeah. So it's just interesting. We talked about class earlier, and I was very much aware of class when I became an artist.
Funny, I wasn't aware of class until I went to college, till I went to art school. And I mean, you and I both went to school late in life, but I mean, you were doing hair and I was waitressing. So it was, I think I was like 24 or something when I finally went to art school, and that's when it hit me. That's when I was like, wow, in America, not everyone can get an education like they say.
Were you a little embarrassed? Like a little embarrassed?
No, I just fought for more money all the time because I was like, I want to do it, and I was older, and so I knew to do that.
Yeah.
But, like I knew I had to or I wouldn't get it. But, yeah, I'm really fortunate and lucky that like someone turned me on to photography when I was 21.
Go back to the idea of access.
That was access. But that was just someone coming home to dinner that worked with my mother's boyfriend, and the guy was actually just taking a photography class at a tech school. And I was like, you can go to school for photography?
Right.
Yeah.
And he was a carpenter. So that was the first time. And then as soon as I saw something and then discovered art, it's just like, I was like, I can go to school. I can go to school. I thought I was going to go to graduate school, but I didn't realize you can't go to graduate school without an undergraduate degree. So
well, you don't know.
So first I had to go to the tech photography school, then to the art school, then to graduate school. But after the tech school, I was like, no, I'm ready to go to grad school for photography. Yeah.
I did the same thing. I kind of went to like a tech school, kind of, and then worked my way. Yeah. But I think you kind of learn kind of real sustainable things in those type of programs because everybody is there for a reason.
Yeah.
You know, I always say that there should be a tech school and an art school in the same building. Like you could learn both or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't know that. Oh, you know, or maybe I did. I just had too much wine and I forgot.
So another question that comes to mind when I think about sort of both of your practices is this idea of duration, of how long one sustains engagement. You know, how do you know when to stop? Do you? You know?
Well, I'm glad you brought that one up. I mean, that's a big thing. Here's the thing that I'm kind of like colonizing a people, dropping in and doing a couple and then I have a real problem with that. Real problem with that. The reason why I did 6 years is to let them know I was serious. And trust. I mean, you're telling these people, oh, trust me, trust me, trust me. But you're not giving the people in need anything that would trigger their psychology to say, I trust you. Usually people in need to have things done before they open up. It's like walking up to someone saying, let's just have a baby. I don't even know you, but let's just have a baby. Like, right now. Yeah, right. So it's this idea of what are you putting on the table to warrant that trust? You're just in your kind of, I guess, power demanding their trust because what? I guess because you're you? I have a real problem with that. So generally what I do is I just listen, stay quiet, and do what they need. And somewhere along the line, they come to me and start to discover, and they talk to me, but I let them. Their needs have to be met. If they have no place to live, if their abuse, because so many people in foster care have sexual and mental abuse, is so foregrounded, but I'm asking them for something. It takes a long time. So I have to have a long partnership, basically, to have a conversation.
Sure. Well, trust has to be built, it seems to me.
And people don't need the same thing.
And people do not need the same things.
The first time I did a kind of sort of out in the environment project, I remember the curator grabbed a bunch of catalogs. It's like we're going to go talk. We're going to go talk to we're going to talk to the people on the border, and we're going to bring catalogs.
I
was like,
never show my work.
I was like, they probably need money.
Yeah.
They need money probably. So why don't you bring $25, $50 bills, and let's see if we can work that out. And she was like, well, why would I do that? And I said, well, you're talking to people that are cart handlers. That's their job. So if you're going to take up an hour or two, they're going to lose money. So pay them for their time. She's like, I never thought about that. And I said, you don't have to. You don't have to. But me, I think it's interesting is because jobs and merchants, I come from that just so much that for me, time and kind of money, it's just, I'm so cautious with taking up people's time.
It's very interesting because I'm the opposite in a lot of ways, the same. But I mean, I've been making work in the United States and out of the United States with communities, and in the 90s there was a lot about identity and exploiting and colonizing, and it's back, and I have never paid one person to ever be in any of my work, and the only people that ever bring up money are the people. It's like what you say. It's like it's what how they label you. It's like they need to do that, and
Much more intimate.
Well, no, yeah, it's like I don't even, it takes a long, long time. But, the thing is not one of the girls, they trust me and I trust them, or the workers, or the 70-year-old dancers. But the world doesn't trust. It's like, I don't know. It's just, after seeing your pavilion, I went back to Poland and I was like, I'm going to read a biography on James Baldwin, and it was amazing. Everything. He's like, life is cruel, and like people need help, and it
Well, we just do it our way.
Yeah,
We
yeah,
just do it our way.
yeah.
I mean, you're like mama. I'm not. I'm like, look, you got to get a job.
No, I
Get a
want to
job.
do that. Okay, girls, you got to get a job.
No. Everybody has a different
No,
thing.
no,
Everybody has a.
yeah.
I mean, I grew up like at the shampoo bowl. I mean, that was like what I remember. My earliest memories of like shampooing the hair. Was so. And even my
Yeah.
creativity. My
Right.
mom put me in the back and say, "See all these wigs back here? You can play around with them." So it just kind of and you know what? Like sustainability.
Yeah, that's
Like-
what I'm learning now.
No. It's just we did do it different.
No, I'm just saying, like, first I'm like, they need a voice. And then I'm like, then they need therapy and to learn about their bodies. And now
Yeah.
I'm like, Jesus, they need a job and a roof. Like, it's
It's all.
like I'm
yeah.
learning.
It's all.
Yeah.
It's always. It's like I call her my sister, but she's real hot headed. Ooh, she's hot headed, and I told them, Mark, I cussed that woman out at the job, and I told her this, and I told her that, and I would listen, and I would listen. I'd say, I said, well, do you still have the job? I was always like, well, do you still have the job? And sometimes it was yes, and sometimes it was a long pause. I was like, Tina. So this, like, I think that's the way I show caring. I think I show it in a pragmatic way. I love to fight for that, or get out of bed to help her with her hair for her job, which, by the way, that still happens. They still call me and say, I'm going to come by the studio so you can fix my hair. I said, no, wait, I'm a little bit busy. Well, come by. What is the job for? So we just do it different ways. We just do it like, my mom was probably more like you. I was always the, like.
Well, in both cases, it seems like it's really about like what is that system of exchange? What is being traded? And it's not, sometimes it's money and sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's something else.
It's not just money.
Yeah.
No, I was
Yeah.
going to say that
But it's
listening to
And
someone,
listening
it's really,
and time and voice and
listening to somebody is really giving someone your time
Yeah.
and your attention where no one gives you attention is really meaningful, I think. Yeah. But then there's so much more need. There's so much more.
For sure. Speaking of need, I'm getting the signal.
I know I forgot about you guys.
We're running. They're out there. We're running a little long, but we'd love to take a couple of questions from the audience. If people can bring hands up, we've got a couple of folks roaming around with microphones, and we can take questions in English and Polish and Italian. And we can try other languages, but we'll be winging it if we do other ones. So, any questions from the audience? And we can keep talking.
I think they're happy.
I think they are.
Okay. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so
Thank you,
much
guys.
for coming.
Oh, can I just say one more thing?
Of course you do.
I know this might be embarrassing for Mark, but when I was asked to do the pavilion, it was really a great honor. But the Polish pavilion is a set budget, and the first thing that was going to be lost were the educational. That weren't going to get funded. Like the art could get funded, but all of the workshops and the educational stuff I do with the girls couldn't be fit into that budget because it wasn't art. And Mark purchased an artwork of mine, and all of the money went to the girls in the workshops. And we couldn't have done it. We really couldn't have done it. And I think it really shows that, the institution is failing, like you were saying, and how I would have just gone into more and more debt, and I wouldn't have been able to do what I did with the girls, and I would have had to shortchange all of the educational parts that I totally believe in, and I wasn't willing to do that, but I didn't know how to get out of it, and then this miracle happened. So, Mark, thank you, and you really, 52 girls had an amazing experience because of you. Thank you. Thank you.
And thank you all. Thank you for coming.
My mother's here, so.
Rodchenko girls are here somewhere.
Woo!